So last time, if you recall, we were talking about why you might want to take this course and what our goals were in the course to familiarize you with the discipline of architecture, to enhance your ability to really be an architectural gourmet, and to encourage you to be an activist, to really care about some issues in architecture. So today, talk morphs a little bit in a different direction. We're going to be discussing an attitude we'll take toward architecture throughout the whole semester. So we're going to have a kind of working definition of architecture throughout the whole course. That is, I'm afraid, not a dictionary definition of architecture, but an idea about what architecture is and what role it plays in society. So for the purposes of this course, we're going to define architecture as a physical embodiment of who we are as individuals and who we are collectively as a culture. Architecture is a physical embodiment of who we are as individuals and who we are collectively as a culture. Now, let me give you a few examples of how that might play out. So let's imagine for a moment that when you became a freshman here at UT, UT had this amazingly liberal policy about their dormitories. And they would allow you to do anything you wanted to your dorm room. You could customize it, redesign it to fit who you were. And so let's say you moved into one of those little Jester dorm rooms. And the first thing you did was you painted everything black. The walls and ceiling, everything black. And you put on a blackout shade on that little prison window there. You found this badass zebra skin rug, and you put that on the floor, the black and white stripes really bold, and you found a kind of matching zebra print bedspread that you put on the bed. And then you got one of those disco balls with all the tiny little mirrors, and you hung that in the center of the room, and you got one of these laser beam lights to shine up to it so it sent sparkly light all over the whole room. Got yourself a couple of really great rock posters that you put on that black wall. Then you got these big, enormous Bose speakers. Kind of dominated the room. But man, when you turned those things on, ooh, the sound was overwhelming. So you just were immersed in music when you turned that on. So you really made this badass kind of den of iniquity out of that dorm room at Jester. So let's say then I walk up through Jester, I go up to your floor, I knock on your door, you got your speakers on, the whole thing's in full motion. I walk in, I would definitely get an impression of who you were as an individual. That architecture would become a physical embodiment of who you are as an individual, and whether I intended to or not, whether I did it consciously or not, I would get an impression of who you are by where you lived. So let's say, totally different scenario. Imagine that you went in that same Jester dorm room and you painted it Pepto-Bismol pink, bright, cheery pink, everything, walls, ceilings, all pink. And on that little window, you put a bright, white, lacy curtain made of little eyelet lace, really delicate and pretty. You found a matching bedspread, exactly the same white lace that you put on the bed. Then you put this white, furry, deep pile rug on the floor to sort of match the white in the drapes of the bedspread. Then you took all your stuffed animals from your entire childhood, and you put them all over the bed and in the corners of the room, just filled it with these stuffed animals. And you put a little cork board on the wall, and on it you put the corsage from your senior prom, and some pictures of you and your buddies and various activities, your friends, up on that cork board. And let's say I went and knocked on the door and entered your room. I would get an impression of who you were by the physical environment that you inhabited there. Now, honestly, even if you did nothing to that room and it were just the stark, bare room that they issued you when you came in the first day of school, even then I would get an impression of who you were as an individual. And again, I want to emphasize, not so much intentional. I'm not making a judgment. I just get a feeling from the environment where you live. Now let's move to a slightly different scale. So let's say you graduate from UT, and let's say your major was elementary education, and you got a really good teaching job in Lockhart, a little town about 30 miles from Austin. Lockhart's got a little courthouse in the center of town, a beautiful little square with retail around it, and then immediately turns into these leafy, beautiful little neighborhoods. And let's say, the rents are fairly reasonable out there. You and a roommate were able to rent one of these cute little bungalow houses with a tree-lined street, sweet little residential neighborhood. And you were able to, always wanted to have a garden, so now you have enough room. You can raise some flowers and some vegetables in the garden. You wake up every morning, you hear the birds chirping in the trees. You have 3 huge pecan trees in your yard. In the fall, you're picking up pecans and shelling the pecans. You have a little porch on the front of your house. Sometimes you shell pecans out there on the porch. Sometimes you sit there in the porch swing and do your email on your laptop. Almost always there's a neighbor who's walking by, maybe a dog and a kid. Everybody walks in that neighborhood because you can walk to the grocery store, you can walk to the elementary school where you teach, you walk to church. So you're living in this sweet little neighborhood. You know your neighbors, they know you. And let's say you live there for 10 years. This will have an impact on who you are as an individual. It will make a difference in the kind of social attitudes you have, the kind of activities you participate in, the kind of interests you pursue. It'll have an impact on your life. So again, by contrast, let's imagine that you graduate from UT and instead you decide to move to New York. You get a cool job in New York, pays pretty well, but you realize, oh my God, it costs a fortune to live in New York. You look around, finally you find this barely affordable, tiny little apartment you can move into. It's not actually on Manhattan, it's over in Brooklyn, kind of an emerging neighborhood. Used to be industrial buildings over there where they manufactured things, but now, because Brooklyn got so popular, now they're dividing them up into apartments. Actually, the building you're in, it's not even really legal. It's supposed to be an industrial building, but they've kind of converted it, and you've got a tiny little slice of an apartment up on the 5th floor. There's no elevator, you have to walk up to that. And in it, you really don't have much of a kitchen. You got a kind of 2-burner cooktop and a half a refrigerator. You wake up in the morning, you don't hear the birds singing, you hear the dumpster being emptied in the back alley behind you. It's a really tiny, really kind of difficult place to live in, but right outside the door, you're in this amazing city, and there's such intensity, and there's such cool things going on all the time. You're always out in the city, totally anonymous. You are, no one knows who you are. You don't know anyone in this city, but it's really stimulating and lively and invigorating to be in one of the greatest cities in the world and tapped into that energy. Again, you live in Brooklyn in that apartment for 10 years, and it will shape who you are. It will make a difference in the kind of person you are. And for sure, here we are on the UT campus. The time you spend here will in fact shape you. It will make a difference in the kind of person you are, and it'll make a difference whether you'd gone to Trinity University in San Antonio, a completely different campus, or A&M, for God's sake, a completely different campus. But because you came here, it's going to have an impact on who you are, actually. And it happens in ways maybe we're not so conscious of. So this is a university that has the audacity to say, what starts here changes the world. And honestly, it's also a campus that actually conveys that meaning. This is a campus that you feel the kind of power of this university. You feel the dominance, the strength, the audacity of the university in this grand axis and in that main building that looms over and lords over the city. UT campus says, as clearly as that tagline, what starts here changes the world. And if you inhabit this campus for 4 years as an undergraduate, and you walk up this South Mall, and you walk across that main plaza, and you look at that tower over and over again, I'm saying unconsciously, subliminally, you feel like I'm in an important place. And therefore, I'm kind of an important person. I actually have the capability of having an impact on the world. So I always love it when someone way more intelligent and important than me says something I believe in, and then I can lean on them for authority. And in this instance, I want to lean on Winston Churchill. Doesn't get much better than Winston Churchill in terms of a smart, important guy. But Winston Churchill, at the end of World War II, was in a really tough position. The British had been fighting the Germans in the war, and they had used all their money to try to win the war. They borrowed heavily from the United States, so they were in debt. And London was just devastated by the bombing in the war. Neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood completely destroyed. Even the Houses of Parliament were destroyed. And Winston Churchill was going back to Parliament and saying, even though we have no money, even though we have no resources to do this, we have to rebuild this Parliament building. And in that speech, rousing speech, he said, we shape our buildings. Thereafter, our buildings shape us. We shape our buildings. Thereafter, our buildings shape us. Now, I totally believe that, and everything we've just been talking about of a dorm room or a city you live in or the campus you inhabit for 4 years as an undergraduate, these are places where environments are shaping us. And it makes you question, if this is true, why aren't we more aware of that? Why don't we talk about that more? Why don't we get a handle on that more? And I'm outraged by the fact that we are not more aware of this and we don't use it more in shaping ourselves and our society. But I kind of understand it, in that, as I've been saying over and over, the impact of architecture is largely unconscious. It's working on us when we're not even aware it's working on us. Now, recently, there's been a lot of research in neuroscience that has validated the importance of the unconscious in our behavior. Now that we can actually see the activity of the brain, we realize that 90% of brain activity is unconscious. We're not directing that brain activity. It's the brain taking its own direction. And there's a fantastic book called Incognito by David Eagleman. Eagleman's an outstanding neuroscientist. And in it, he really emphasizes how much of our behavior is unconscious. He makes the point, for example, that if you're driving a car and you actually consciously decide I'm going to change lanes, you can't do it. You'll screw it up because we have to kind of train ourselves and then allow ourselves to unconsciously move the wheel, accelerate, do all the things we need to turn. But if we actually try to do it consciously, we screw it up. If you try to serve in tennis and you really think about, okay, how do I bring my arm back? How high do I bring my racket? How do I hit that ball? You'll make a terrible serve. Now, sometimes you have to do that when you're trying to change your serve, to really kind of force yourself to think intentionally. But the goal is to let your unconscious brain take over, and you just like freaking and make a serve. If you try to ride a bicycle and really think about pushing the pedal down, steering the handlebars, keeping your balance, you'll fall down on your ass. That's the power of the unconscious brain to actually enable us to do what we want to do. Now, it's in that unconscious part of our brain that architecture lives. We experience these things, they have an impact on us, but we're not necessarily conscious of that. Let me give a couple of examples. Very well-known social science researcher named Roger Ulrich is interested in how we improve healthcare through making a better environment for healthcare. And he did a study in a hospital where there's a double-loaded corridor down the center of the building. There are identical rooms on both sides. There are identical staffs that are servicing those rooms, the same doctors and nurses. Similar kinds of patients are in those rooms. But there's only one difference. On one side, the rooms look 20 feet out of the window to a blank brick wall. It's dark, there's not much light that comes in. It's depressing looking out at that blank wall. But that's one side of the corridor. Then on the other side of the corridor, those same windows look out on a beautiful garden with a fountain, big trees, little kids playing down there. And he's interested in whether the difference just in that one part of the physical environment, the view, would have an impact on the health and the recovery of those patients. And in fact, it's very much the case. He looked at requests for pain medication, much higher on the side that looked in the blank wall, much lower requests for pain medication on the side that looked into the garden. He looked at length of stay in the hospital for comparable maladies. Again, longer length of stay in the rooms that looked into the blank wall than in the rooms that looked into the garden. Now, did those doctors think, oh my God, that patient is going to get well a lot faster because they're in the room that looks in the park? No. Was the patient conscious? I'm going to heal a lot faster. I don't need pain medication. I've got a beautiful view out my window. All of it is unconscious. But is it powerful? Does it make a difference? Obviously, by Roger Ulrich's research. Another example. A woman named Lisa Hishong, actually she's the author of the second book we read in this class. But after she wrote that book, she got very interested in the effect of natural light on how children learn. And so she got a funded study from the state of California, and then later another funded study from a bunch of Western states to look at different classrooms and the amount of natural light they have. And then to look at the performance of the students. Did they improve in the year that they spent in that classroom? And because we test the hell out of kids these days, there's a lot of data that we can use to evaluate that. So she looked at some rooms that had no windows whatsoever. She looked at some classrooms that had modest-sized windows. And then she looked at some classrooms that had floor-to-ceiling glass and maybe even a skylight in addition to that. And what she found out was that improvement in both reading scores and math scores were significantly higher in the rooms with more natural light. And in fact, in the rooms with an abundance of natural light, there was a significant uptick in the learning that happened in the year those kids were in that room, compared to a room with less natural light. Now, in that case, There actually is a physiological explanation, because our bodies produce serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, in direct proportion to the amount of daylight we get. So if we get more daylight, our bodies produce more serotonin. It then helps us make synaptic connections. It helps our neurons wire together. It basically means we learn better. It also is very much like Ritalin. It makes us more alert. So in those classrooms where the kids are getting lots of natural light, they've got high serotonin production, their bodies are more receptive to learning, and they learn more. Now, did those students or did those teachers think, oh, fantastic, we're in a light-filled classroom. My serotonin production is going to be way up and I'm going to learn a lot better? Of course not. They're completely unconscious of it, but by the evidence of improved test scores, we can see that there really is a difference in the physical environment and its effect on shaping those kids and their learning capability. Now, all of that is incredibly compelling to me and lets me understand how critical it is for us to understand the way that physical environments shape our behavior. Probably this was brought home to me in the most cogent way when I was in my 20s. I'd just gotten out of graduate school. I had a really, really good friend who had gone to Harvard to graduate school. I'd gone to M.I.T. to graduate school, but we lived about 2 blocks from each other in the Back Bay in Boston. And my friend had, when he graduated, he got a job in another city. Super job, he loved it, dream job. He moved to the other city. I stayed in Boston, taught at M.I.T. for a few years before I moved back to Texas. But in that period, we continued to be very, very good friends. And he would call me just a few months after he moved and say, Larry, gee, I don't know what it is. I'm just depressed. I can hardly drag myself out of bed in the morning. I'm just depressed. And that's not like me. I've never had this problem before. And I don't know how to deal with it. My job is exactly what I expected. It's good. The city I'm in, I like it. It's good. But I'm super depressed. So I hear that a few phone calls, and finally I said, look, let me drive down just a couple hours away and try to cheer you up for a weekend. So I go down there, I go by his office, pick up a key, go by his house, and I'm going to sort of get settled in, and he'll come home later for dinner. And I go to the neighborhood where his house is, and whoa, dude, super sketchy neighborhood. I go to the house itself. It's a walk-up, so he's on the 4th floor. I go into the stairwell. It smells awful. It smells like pee in the stairwell. I walk up the 4 flights of stairs, kind of holding my nose. I get to his apartment. I open it. To his credit, the landlord had painted it right before my friend moved in, but they had just spray painted everything beige. The walls, the floors, the ceiling, the doors, the hardware on the doors, the kitchen cabinets. They just went in and spray painted everything beige. It was sloppy and awful. My friend had not really moved in. He just had a mattress on the floor. He still had all his books in boxes, been there for a couple of months. And it was an awful place to live. So when he came home, I said, dude, I understand why you're depressed. You live in a really depressing place. And he said, Larry, Jesus, that's just you being an architect. It doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I spend most of my time at work anyway. I don't hang out much here. I don't know what it is causing my depression, but that's not it. So forget it. So we hung out for the weekend. He's modestly better. And I went back to Boston. But I continue to hear this, I'm depressed. And finally, a month or two later, I said, dude, you got a 6-month lease on your place. It's almost up. You need to move. let me come down and let's look for a better place for you to live. So I drive down there again, and we look around, we find this really cool apartment. Partly, he still thought of himself as this poor graduate student, and he's living in a cheap place. I finally convinced him he actually was making some money and he could afford a better place. So we found this gorgeous little apartment on the ground floor of a brownstone building. And the whole living room, dining room, kitchen opened out to this gorgeous little patio with a big tree, brick pavers. So he leased that apartment. We went out and bought him a few modest pieces of furniture, some plants, got him kind of settled in a little bit there. And then I went back to Boston. And so then, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, on a Sunday, he calls me up and he said, "Oh man, I had the best day today. Yeah, I got up this morning, and you know, about 3 blocks from my new place, there's a little park and it has a tennis court in it. So 3 guys from my office and I went down to the tennis court, played doubles tennis for a couple of hours in the morning. Super cool, really, really nice, had a lot of fun. And then on the way home, you know that little bakery that's just at the corner at the end of my street? We stopped by the bakery, got some croissants and some orange juice, brought it back to my house, and we sat out on the back patio in that patio furniture you forced me to buy, and had our croissants and orange juice, and spread out the newspaper and read the newspaper, talked politics. You know, those are great guys. I'm really enjoying getting to know them. And then later on, we moved back inside to the living room and watched a football game on Sunday afternoon on TV. And man, I just had a really great day. You know, I'm getting over this depressed thing. I'm just not feeling it anymore. I feel a whole lot better. I'm like, dude, you idiot. You're a freaking Harvard graduate. You're supposed to be a smart guy. But you don't understand the power of the physical environment to make the difference between whether you're depressed or whether you're happy, whether you have friends or whether you don't have friends, whether you participate in activities like playing tennis or you don't. The physical environment is a crucible that you live your life in. And if it's good, your life is good. If it's not good, it can be very problematic. So that's an attitude we're going to have for the rest of the semester, really looking at how architecture is a physical embodiment of who we are as individuals and who we are collectively as a culture, and the impact it has, mostly unconsciously, on the way we live our lives and our behavior. Okay, see you next time.